Hi, my name's Alan Durant, and I'm an author of books for children, right through from picture books to middle grade fiction, right up to young adult fiction, which is actually where I started off as a writer. Now, I want to talk a bit about character. Now, as a reader, and definitely as a writer, I think that characters are the most important part of any story. Yeah, of course, the plot is important, and the style of a story is important. Not so much, I don't think, for children as readers, but certainly as adult readers. But the most important thing is the characters. And certainly as a writer, I find that the most exciting thing is that when I'm sitting down thinking about what my next story will be, is I'm always thinking about, right, what kind of character am I going to write about? Because the character leads the story. Now, at school, you're taught to do all these things where you're supposed to do mind mapping. You're supposed to create these great character portraits with all these adjectives about what your character's like. But the problem with that, of course, is that when you come to write the story, and certainly I see this all the time when I go into schools, is because they write the story and none of the character traits that they've written down at the beginning show up in the story. So you think, well, hold on, what was the point of that? What was the point of saying that character is angry and is aggressive and is very, very resourceful if none of that comes through from the story? So really, to me, these things are just superfluous. That's not how you start off with a character. When you're planning a character, what you start from is just thinking, right, what is it about this character that is going to make a story? Have they got some kind of power? Have they got some kind of gift? Have they got a problem, a situation that needs resolving? Something about them that's actually going to create a story. Now, when you're writing picture books, this is often what the whole story is about. So the characterization is very, very broad and very simple. If you take a book like my book, Burger Boy, for instance, which is basically the story of a boy called Benny who only eats burgers and eventually turns into a burger. Very simple scenario, very simple story. As you go over into older fiction, then these characters create a bit more. They have a bit more about them. And you can follow different strands. And you can look into the nuances of the personality more, so by the time you get to young adult fiction, you've got this really very, very beautifully nuanced portrait of a character, and more than one character, and this is what really, really keeps us reading. But that first character that you create, there has to be something about them that's going to make a story. And to me, so I start off with that, and then the next thing I do is I always think about what the name of my character is going to be. I find names of characters really important in a story. If I get the name right, I can hear them talking in my head, and once they're talking in my head, then I feel like I've got them. Okay? And then the last thing is I always think about how my character is going to be at the end of the story. Because in any story, you don't want it to just go along like that. There has to be something learnt, something changed, something developed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, and that is so important, right? So I like to know what that thing's going to be. I want to know, where is my character going to be at the end of the story when they've gone through this journey and all these things have happened to them? And that's pretty much all I need to know about the character. And then after that, I can fill things in. Now, I'm writing a story at the moment, an online story. It's been very interesting because my two main protagonists, a girl called Nonny and a boy called Johan, have not been described in the story, apart from the fact that Nonny is black and Johan is white. That's pretty much all I've said. And sometimes I kind of do this. I just think, well, I'll let the reader fill those details in. That's part of the fun of being a reader. As a writer, you do half the job. The reader does the rest. And so I kind of left those quite free. And some readers have come back and said, oh, we'd like to have more information. And some have come back and said, you know what? I don't want any more information. I really enjoy creating the idea of what that character looks like and who they are, So it can work both ways. Now, usually I would give a lot more suggestion about what the character looks like, because obviously I have to have an idea in my head of what the character looks like. To me, that's just really, really important if you want the character to be really convincing. But it's kind of how they sound, the things they do, and you want all these things to be consistent. They're part of their character might be they're inconsistent, in which case that's what you're showing. But there's kind of a consistency that has to come through. And I think that's why if you load your character with loads of personality traits at the beginning, when you're building them up and deciding what they're going to be like, you can kind of lumber them with this stuff and it just doesn't really come through during the story. This is one of my favourite characters. Is called Spider McDrew. That's one of his earlier incarnation. He's a hopeless case, and that's what he's defined as, a hopeless case. And really, you know, in a picture book, that would have been it. He'd just been Spider-Man True, he's a hopeless case. And that's how it starts off. It's a story here. So it says, Spider McDrew was a hopeless case. Everyone said so. His mother said it each morning when Spider came down to breakfast, wearing one blue sock and one orange sock, or with his jumper on back to front. Oh, Spider, she said, shaking her head sadly, you're a hopeless case. His teachers call him a hopeless case. All the children at school call him a hopeless case, and that's basically what he is. But in the end, he comes out on top. I love this character. He's still a character to me who speaks in my head. Now, when you're creating characters, sometimes you create characters who are acquaintances. They live for one story, and then they kind of go off into the world, and you don't really meet them again. Except maybe if you look in your book. But other characters, and Spider's one of these, they stay with you. They're friends. And you can hear them talking in your head the whole time. Now, I wrote this book a long time ago, about 20 years ago. I haven't written a new Spider-Man True story for probably about 10 years or more. But I can still hear him talking in my head. He's a friend, you know, and I could write another story about him today. In fact, maybe I will. I'd really like to. Now, this is my most recent book for readers of sort of 10 to 12-year-olds, basically. So it's like a middle grade fiction, the top end of that middle grade fiction thing. And I think one of the interesting things is when you're creating character is kind of creating character by showing a character through someone else's eyes. And I think this is kind of one of the most interesting ways of doing it. I thought I would just read you a little bit from... Yeah, the main character is the character called Dak. It's told in his voice. It's his story. But this is him introducing a new character who's going to be very significant in the story. In among the mess, sitting with their back to the door, hunched in front of a computer screen, there was someone. It was to this person that Stefan now spoke. Violet, he said. Violet, I brought someone to meet you. The response was a deep, theatrical sigh. Then slowly, as if to make a point slowly, the person turned to face the room, and I found myself gazing at the unsmiling features of a girl about my own age, possibly a little older. She had a long, pale face with dirty blonde hair, the colour of a dogfish's body. She wore a grey, stripy T-shirt, blue denim shorts and white trainers. Her fingernails, still resting on the computer's keyboard, were a vivid turquoise. Her eyes were on Stefan. She didn't look at me at all. Stefan waved his large hand in my direction. This is Dak, he said. Still the girl ignored me. She was either very shy or very rude, I thought. Dak's our most dedicated customer. He comes to the aquarium every day, and now he's helping out with the feeding too. The girl gave me a quick, hostile glance. Dak, this is my niece, Violet, Stefan continued. Violet McGee. Her school's broken up for the summer, and her parents are away, so she's come to stay with me. He smiled again, but this time less confidently. I thought I ought to say something. Hi, Violet, I muttered. Violet gave me an even more hostile glance. Her eyes were small, fierce, and as startlingly bright green as a tree frog, and looked just as poisonous. Dak, she snorted. What sort of a name is that? She frowned. Can I go back to the computer now? I was in the middle of a game. Very rude, I concluded. Violet McGee, a very important character in the story and one I really, really enjoyed creating. But basically, because it's told in Dak's voice, you see her through Dak's eyes. I guess a lot of the characters that I've created were inspired by the sort of children and the characters that I read about when I was a child. Certainly my favourite ever character in all the books I ever read as a child was George from the Famous Five, which I still think is a bit strange now, because I was such a boysy boy, and yet she's a girl. But she was, of course, a tomboy. Her real name was Georgina. And she was bossy, and she was difficult, and she was a bit overbearing, but she had such a spirit of adventure about her, which I absolutely loved, and I still do today. And I think probably that character is always there at the back of my head, telling me, saying, oh, come on. Oh, don't write that character. For goodness sake, you can do better than that. So, characters, incredibly important. The most important thing Never, never underestimate them when you're writing.